financial sector, technology and service provider, consultants and developers, or academia? So make sure you all vote. Can I proceed? Okay. So now, oh, we're still getting some results. Okay. So it looks like we've got a good mix with a very large cohort from the municipal sector, which is good. It's very good to see so much diversity in the room in terms of where we're all represented. So moving on to the next question. Where do you reside? Western Canada, such as British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, Ontario, the Maritimes, Newfoundland and Labrador, or other? Wait, yeah. Okay, look at that. Okay, pretty Ontario-centric audience here today, with a couple folks from the West. So that's something to consider. We'll move on to our next question. If you work with a municipality, what is the population range of that municipality? 1, very small. 2, small, we're talking 10,000 to 20,000. 3, medium, 21,000 to 150,000. Large, 151,000 to 500,000. 5 is very large, greater than 501,000. And 6 if you don't work for a municipality. So I'll just wait for some of the results coming in. And okay, so the majority do not work for a municipality, but within the group of people that do, there's a fairly good mix represented, which is great to see. It'll help inform our discussion. And the next question, does the municipality that you work for or with, in the case of consultants or developers, take an integrated approach to municipal water management? Yes, no, or if you're not sure, select 3. It's a really cool system. I've never had the privilege of using it, but it's pretty amazing to get that feedback right away. It's data on the spot. Pretty incredible stuff. Okay, so a large plurality says yes, and a large third are not sure. Okay, and that's a lot of what today is about is explaining and going through that approach. And just to follow up on this, the next question we're going to ask is, if you answered yes to the previous question, what systems are in fact integrated? Number 1, stormwater and drinking water only, or 2, stormwater and wastewater only, or 3, wastewater and drinking water only, 4, all 3, stormwater, wastewater, drinking water, and 5, none of the above. Maybe they're not integrated. So let's wait a second to get some more results. Okay, I think it's good. Okay, so you could see that none of the above. That's interesting. That those who said yes now after seeing what the breakdown, have second thoughts about that. But in terms of those who are sure about which systems are integrated, it looks like a large number have all 3 systems integrated. This is very good information that's going to really color and provide context to some of the discussion that we're going to have next. So I want to thank you for your feedback, and now I'm going to open it up to the members of our panel, our expert panel. And for the sake of time, I'll provide a brief bio for each of them. But please refer to your program guide if you want to learn more about each presenter. So as I introduce you, just stand up so everyone can see who you are. Phil James is the manager of Urban Watershed Protection and Restoration for Credit Valley Conservation. Thank you, Phil. Ed McBean is a professor of water resources and Canada Research Chair in Water Supply Security at the University of Guelph. Thank you. Gail Krantzberg is professor and director of the Center of Engineering and Public Policy in the School of Engineering at McMaster University. Thank you. And Rob Jamieson is an associate professor at Dalhousie University. So now I'd like to turn it over to Phil James from Credit Valley Conservation to provide the watershed perspective. Phil?
Thank you, John. Sorry, I'm backing up got a little ahead of myself here. So what I wanted to talk about is, what is an integrated and holistic approach to water management? You hear different phrases. It's branded differently. It's described differently. And I just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of some of the things that we've learned through this project. So integrated and holistic water management, sustainable water management systems. You hear about the blue city, the water sustainable city of the near future. You hear a lot about the one water concept. So Los Angeles uses a one water branding. One water, integrating water resources. And then when you look over in Europe, they talk about the single system of water. So very similar to the one water, but just a different spin to it. And they talk about river basin management for Europe. And here in Ontario, and many provinces of Ontario, we talk about the integrated watershed management approach for water. So a lot of when you delve into these descriptions, they often mean the same thing. So I wanted to kind of drill down and kind of talk about this in a little bit more detail. So as Darwin said in his presentation, you need to look at the watershed as an asset. It is an extremely important asset. It's an asset that helps give you context and helps you to look at your systems in a holistic and integrated way to manage them as a one systems approach. So in a typical urban watershed, this is a Credit River watershed, but we've added some fictitious elements to try and accent the different points that we want to talk about. You have water infrastructure. You have groundwater-based municipalities that rely on groundwater for their drinking water supply. You have river-based systems, such as Brantford, that draw their drinking water from the Grand River. And then, of course, you've got lake-based drinking water systems. A lot of these systems are treated through centralized water treatment facilities, the lake, at the river, or at the commissioning of the wells. You have sanitary sewer infrastructure. You have what we call combined sewer systems through Toronto and Hamilton and Niagara and St. Catharines that have stormwater and wastewater combined into one pipe. The newer areas, we have separate sanitary sewer systems, and in some of our more rural areas, we have our septic systems. And for the most part, we're looking at a centralized system again. Wastewater treatment plants collect all that wastewater, treat it at one point, and then it's discharged. And then finally, our stormwater system. You have your traditional older style systems, which is just your pipes and your catch basins, based on that philosophy of getting the water rapidly removed from the urban environment and sent to the receiving water course as quickly as possible. Then as stormwater evolved, we're seeing the use of end-of-pipe stormwater management facilities, which is another centralized system. You pipe and channel all that water to one point where it's contained, treated, and then released to the receiving system. And then, of course, you've got other infrastructures that can cross through the watershed. You have pipelines. This is a pipeline that's going to be coming up in the next 10 years through Halton. That is also going to supply water to areas that are actually groundwater-based that have reached capacity and in order to grow need additional water. So water's crossing boundaries. It's no longer following its natural paths. It's piped, it's conveyed, and that's a integral part of it. The other thing is that governance. and Gail will talk about this later on, is that you have different levels of government, different municipalities managing these systems. Some like smaller tier manage all three, but in other areas you've got one government or municipality managing stormwater, and then you have another municipality managing the water and wastewater. And it's it's very difficult to think of it holistically when you have so many different people managing it in isolation. And it's important to recognize that upstream actions have downstream impacts. And in our headwater areas, we have Orangeville, which has experienced intensive growth because of places to grow legislation. They're going to be developing, which could mean more impervious cover, which could mean less water infiltrating into our ground, less water feeding our groundwater supplies, which means less potable water for people to drink. But it also has an impact on the receiving river in that water that used to recharge the river during the drier periods of the summer now has less water. And that impacts downstream wastewater treatment plants because they now have less water for a slimmative capacity. So the downstream wastewater treatment plants could have a harder time meeting their slimmative capacity targets because there's less base flow because of activities that are happening in the upper parts of the watershed. As well, you think of cities like Brantford, they get their water from the river, so whatever we're putting into that river in terms of pollutants or poor stormwater management, they have to use that as their drinking water supply. And it's the same thing in the lake system. If we have combined sewer overflows, spills, floods, those pollutants can or impact our intake zones. So when you look at the watershed context really helps you to see the systems as a one water system, to look at it holistically and integrated. And it's challenging. I found this one note here. It said, integrated water resource management is easy to talk about, but really hard to implement, according to a practitioner, and it really is. We did some consultation where we tried to understand what are the key drivers impacting our municipalities from a stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water perspective. And we did conferences, we did surveys, we tried to reach out to as many end users as possible. And the things we heard was, for stormwater, it was climate change, it was aging infrastructure, it was population growth. Those are the bigger high-level pressures on those systems. Similar for wastewater, combined sewer overflows, public health, and for drinking water, similar things, health and public safety were the other things. So those are the kind of the higher level drivers. And when you look at risks, when you look at extreme climate change, so you layer another complexity onto that system in terms of not just integrating it, but what are the pressures that we're going to face, as Darwin talked about, over the next coming years, and how are we going to manage those risks? So with extreme weather, we can have extreme floods, which ends up with erosion, property damage, basements flooding. It could result in extreme dry periods, which causes our reservoirs to dry up, low base flow. This is a creek in South Mississauga where there's just a trickle through it. It's almost dry through the 2000 summer. And then also, with the different pollutants and degraded water quality, we can see that impacts to our fisheries of the Great Lakes, to our beaches, our public health, our drinking water supplies, but it also can impact our wastewater, our water treatment plants. These large algae outbreaks we have along the shoreline can clog intake pipes and have costly repairs and impact our infrastructure, so everything is connected. So what are the key ingredients of a holistic and integrated approach to water management? And that's some of the things we really want to get into today, in high level this morning, but in detail this afternoon. And I think we're going to have some really great conversations. Gail is going to have a session on governance, and she's going to be talking about the different governance models that have been used across Canada, what's working and what's hindering integrated planning. But what I think is really great is Gail's going to talk about what is an ideal governance model that could be used across Canada to support this more integrated and holistic planning, as well as what are some of the key strong points that you need to show good governance. We also have Laura Zizo, who's going to be talking about policy and legal implications associated with different policy around stormwater. We have the University of Guelph, Ed, Richard, and Mark, who will be talking about a risk assessment matrix, which will look at based on those key drivers I described, what are all the different risks that you can expect for water, wastewater, and stormwater, and then what are some case studies and guidance to help you to mitigate those risks based on our research across Canada. And then we also have Guy Filio, who will be talking about risk assessment tools. So PyVC, MRAT, ICLI, and what kind of models are out there that are going to allow you to take an integrated approach to how you evaluate the risks across those three infrastructures. We also have Rob Jamieson and CVC, Amna and Cassie, that are going to talk about the watershed perspective, the use of green technologies such as low-impact development. And then we have Lynn Patterson from RBC, who's going to talk about public perception based on the RBC Blue Water Attitude Surveys. And it's public perception, but also how we perceive our system. Do we perceive stormwater as a waste, or do we perceive it as a resource? Do we perceive wastewater as a waste, or is it something that we can recover nutrients from for fertilizer and reuse it for gray water or for flushing urinals? So it's taking a new paradigm shift. And then, as I mentioned, it's very complicated. Integrated holistic planning is very complicated. And there's going to be a session in the afternoon that I think you'll really enjoy, where we're going to talk about the watershed approach and the master plan approach, but also looking at how is the watershed model the key tool to achieving a sustainable and integrated approach. So everything from, we inventory our infrastructure, our gray infrastructure. From a watershed perspective, we need to start inventorying our green infrastructure, our natural systems, and how they complement one another. Understanding the existing conditions in the context of each other. What kind of risk assessments can we do together to look at what are the risks to our infrastructure locally, but to our watershed at a much larger scale, so that we're making decisions at the local scale that benefit the broader watershed. And then looking at required level of service and what kind of implementation plan, what kind of funding is required. So, and of course, it's an adaptive management process. So I don't want to talk too much. I want to get it back to the panel so that we can have an interactive session and start asking the audience some questions and getting your feedback and ideas, and to build excitement for this afternoon, because I really think you're going to find that the afternoon breakout sessions that the different groups have made are going to be very informative and very interactive. So with that, we are going to start to discuss a working definition for integrated holistic management of water. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Gail to ask the first question.
Thanks, Phil. Not too much passion in Phil's presentation there. He really believes in this stuff. Phil's already outlined why I'm about to ask you this question in terms of the upstream-downstream interactions that are unanticipated if they're very often not anticipated. The fact that water crosses political boundaries, so you need interjurisdictional management tools. So actions by an upstream municipality could actually offer a benefit to a downstream municipality if they're doing some mitigative measures upstream. So it's about this upstream, downstream municipalities, and later on this afternoon we'll talk about upper tier and lower tier municipalities, a different problem. But for today, for this morning, I just want to get a sense of a sense of feeling from you. Because we need different municipalities in many situations to work together, perhaps with other stakeholders, shareholders in the municipality. And this is all about requirements, regulation, not choice. Should this be something that is required, and in this case probably by the province, that a governance model that ensures cooperation for water management at a watershed scale is required by government? So hopefully I've explained to you why it might be necessary, but now the question is, should it be required by government? So I'd like to ask you to either strongly agree that it should be, agree that it should be, maybe you're not so sure, disagree that it shouldn't be, or strongly disagree. So if you want to take out your clickers, we can vote on this now. So what do I press?
So just hit the green button.
I did. Oh, that was green button. All right. So a lot of you feel quite passionate about this as well, because you're saying, yes, it's not something that should be just voluntary. I have probably one person in the room strongly disagrees that government should get in the way here. I'd really like to find out who that person is. Maybe we can meet around the corner. I'm very, very curious, because because government getting in people's faces could be a really not desirable thing. And some of you are not sure, a few of you are not sure. But the tendency seems to be that you see a need for this, and that there's strong agreement that the upper layer of government, not municipal government, but that the province should, and this would be across Canada, should force this. This is so because a lot of what we've talked about in the team, and I'll turn it over to Ed next in a moment. But what we've talked about is that there are a lot of things that municipalities believe should be done, but they don't do it because they don't have the capacity, or they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, but it should be done. So this is a way of perhaps ensuring that it is done, because now it is required. And if it is required, then it more likely gets higher on the agenda to get done. Okay? So thank you for that. I'm just going to pass it on now to Ed, I believe. I don't know how to do that.
And then just hit the green button, the top one. Yeah,
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Morning. It's great to be here. As the introductory remarks were made about myself, my research chair is in water supply security, and so really what it is I've spent the last 4 decades on vulnerability and risk assessment to characterize how can things fail. And as part of that, then, what we did was and Phil mentioned this very quickly, but we looked at surveying at a series of conferences at the outset of this project, and we identified that climate change, aging infrastructure, population growth, and urbanization, they were the 3 key drivers, but there were a number of others that were mentioned, and it also included the ability of receiving waters to assimilate pollution and so on. So with that context in terms of background, what this question is intended to do is to look obviously at does your asset management plan need to include stormwater systems? Now, we did have a question earlier on that, and the number that responded as all of them, meaning water supply, wastewater, and stormwater, were inclusive. So I have a suspicion what's coming, but regardless, we'll get an assessment of it. So water and wastewater asset management plans, they do exist. The degree of ability to implement and to, create the resources and so on to complete them, obviously that varies. And one of the things that we'll be talking about this afternoon at this working group over here on the left will be more specifics on it. But at least we'll leave it at that for now. In order to do a comprehensive risk assessment and benefit cost analysis, full cost recovery, et cetera, do we need to inventory all 3 infrastructure, including stormwater? So if I can just ask you to assess, is stormwater an essential, important part of that? This is the first of 2 questions I will raise. So. Do I push something now to
hit the green button.
the green one?
Yeah.
You're going to trust me to do this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's pretty much in agreement with what we referred to. I think perhaps it's more strongly agreeing than was suggested was actually occurring right now by virtue of the 69%. So certainly interesting. Okay, well, I think with that I will move to the second question.
Green button?
The green button again?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm colorblind, you know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Anyway, the second question that I'm raising is a risk assessment needed to define your required level of service? And we'll be discussing this specifically over here at this table to my left. What we're going to be doing is identifying the source of risk. We will then look at the implications. In other words, how does it translate? So it will be a utility risk integration matrix. So to try to make sure that we don't forget some of the elements, and Phil referred to a lot of them in his sort of preliminary remarks, but to make sure that we don't forget some of the linkages of how the LID, for example, will influence the assimilative capacity of the stream. So We will then take from the source of the risk and the implications, specific direction to guidance documents that can help. The best way to understand how successful have different entities been, and there have been some great ones, especially on climate change. US EPA has created a really fine document. So we will then provide the guidance to where those various reports can be obtained from the internet. So risk assessment tends to reflect how your infrastructure and watershed will tolerate changing climate conditions, extreme rainfall and drought, increased pressure on water resources as a result of growing populations, and risk tolerances with aging infrastructure. So with that, I would ask you to then suggest, is a risk assessment needed to define your required level of service? If you can. So, very strong and, well, strongly agree, and agree being obviously the preponderance, 83%. Strongly disagree, some, anyway. At that point, I'll turn it over to, I think it's Rob.
Yeah.
So how do you get to the next slide? Okay, so this next question kind of proposes that gray infrastructure will continue to play a large role in helping municipalities meet the required level of service in terms of their economic objectives, health and safety objectives, but that green infrastructure should be recognized and should play a stronger role within also meeting many of these objectives, as well as meeting some key environmental performance objectives. And this is a topic that we're going to explore in more detail in one of the sessions this afternoon, and specifically talk about how strategies such as low-impact development or watershed management planning can help us incorporate green infrastructure within some of our infrastructure planning. So the question is, does gray and green infrastructure both play a critical role in meeting the required level of service for your municipality? And so if you could answer the question as either number 1, strongly agree, 2, agree, 3, maybe, 4, disagree, or 5, strongly disagree.
Once you hit 60, you can close it.
So it'd be green button again. Okay, so it seems like most of the audience does strongly or somewhat agree with that statement, which is great. Thanks.
And then just 2 other quick questions. So I mentioned this morning, I talked about the watershed perspective and the importance of looking at the 3 systems as a one water system from the watershed perspective. So the question we wanted to ask the participants today is, do you see watershed planning as a basis for integration of the 3 municipal water systems? Do you think in order to really take a holistic approach to how you manage these systems that you need to follow the watershed planning process to achieve that? I think I'll close it there. Okay. And the results are, yes, 40% agree that is the approach, and we've got about 23% maybe. So as Rob mentioned, we're going to have a much more detailed discussion on this in the afternoon, where we're going to dive into this topic a lot more. We have another quick question. So when we were, so the question is it important to develop an understanding of full cost and benefits of infrastructure, including externalities? So what we mean by that is when you're looking at your three infrastructures and you're comparing alternatives. So if you're looking at, do I go with a bigger pipe or do I go with a green infrastructure solution, that we really need to look at a life cycle cost analysis, a cost-benefit analysis, to look at what are all the direct and indirect costs and what are all your direct and indirect benefits. So a larger pipe, for example, may move the waterway and get rid of the flood risks and drain a particular area, but incorporating a green infrastructure alternative will also provide that service, but also a number of indirect benefits, which are sometimes often difficult to quantify, such as greening your neighborhood, such as protecting your downstream fisheries, protecting your drinking water supply, protecting public health through reduced beach closures, which are sometimes very difficult to quantify, but important in terms of tipping the balances when you're making decisions about infrastructure and which type of infrastructure is going to give you the most benefits, the cost to benefit ratio. So again, strongly agree, agree maybe, disagree, strongly disagree. Let's give it a few more minutes. Okay, so overwhelmingly everyone agrees with that. Okay. Now, we have a few minutes before John's going to make announcements for breaks. Did anyone have any specific comments or questions about the questions we brought up this morning that you would like to ask the panel? As John mentioned earlier, we have 2 microphones in the middle of the room specific to the questions we ask, or any questions about the afternoon breakout sessions that we're going to be getting into shortly after lunch. If you have a question, please feel free to come to the podium. Otherwise, I will invite John back up to talk about next steps, and we'll start break.
Okay, thank you very much, Phil, and let's have a round of applause for our panel experts. That was great. I really liked using that data on the spot system. That's pretty neat. Great way to get instant feedback. So one of the reasons for that was to get a better sense of where everyone stands and some of the issues that we're going to talk about in the breakout sessions in the afternoon. Some of the same folks that are here will be part of the facilitation of those sessions. So I'm really looking forward to that. It'll help. This information will help them tailor their sessions to the groups that are here. So before we break, I just want to highlight Credit Valley Conservation's brand new low impact development guidance documents, and these documents explore innovative approaches to stormwater management. They were just completed, and they're the result of a major partnership with the government of Ontario. There are 4 documents in total at the moment, focusing on low impact development in residential, the ICI sector, road rights-of-way, and more. And they look at every single aspect of a successful low-impact development project, from community consultation all the way to performance management, performance monitoring, construction. It covers everything. And if you're interested in low-impact development options for stormwater management, or if you're ready to start a project, the guides will make sure that your plan becomes a reality and a success. So now it's time for a 30-minute break. Take a moment, stop by the booths that are set up by Credit Valley Conservation, Canadian Water Network, Data on the Spot, and Engineers Canada. And if you're tweeting, don't forget the hashtag #WaterRiskyBusiness. And thanks again for a great start to the morning. Let's reconvene at 10:30.